Hey team, it's Les. Thanks for joining me today for another CHOT training minute. Today we're going to continue in our series on painting the picture, quality documentation in hospice. So just a recap, in part one of this series, we talked about why quality documentation is important and what painting the picture means. Part two, we talked about documenting to decline. And part three, we spoke to eligibility documentation at admission. And today we're going to talk about documenting ADLs. So what are ADLs? Well, ADLs are activities of daily living. These are things we document on every single patient that we have on service. And they are 6 categories: ambulation, continence, transfers, feeding, bathing, and dressing. So why are ADLs and the deficits that we document with our patients' ADL so important? Well, those deficits are the most important predictor of 6-month mortality. They've done studies and they show that they're actually a stronger predictor than diagnosis, mental status, or even ICU admissions. They're also directly tied to the PPS scale. So when a patient goes from 40% on the PPS scale to a 30%, it becomes, as you can see on the screen there, when you go from that 40 to the 30, those mortality rates actually go up quite a bit despite what the diagnosis is. And to go from a 40 to a 30 means that someone has gone from being able to assist in some capacity with even one or more of their ADLs to being totally dependent. So once a patient loses the ability to participate and assist with their ADLs, they actually move to a 30%. And that becomes way more indicative and way more predictive of that mortality rate. So ADL guidelines, so what does that look like? Well, when we talk about how we document, this is a good assistive device here that I've got, and I'll make sure that this actually gets sent out to all the managers so they can share that with you. But these ADL guidelines, this particular thing is a nice tool to be able to look at and say, oh, in ambulation, this patient is either independent or they require minimal assistance or moderate assistance or complete assistance, or they're completely dependent, I should say, upon someone else to do those things for them. And that, if you go through that and couple that with the PPS scale, it'll help you with your documentation. So what does quality documentation look like with ADLs? Well, a lot of times we go through our assessment and we click off the boxes and are they dependent here? Do they need assistance here? But when we get to the narrative, we really don't talk about it sometimes, or we just say maybe the patient's dependent in 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 ADLs. And that's all we say about it. And I have been guilty of this too, I promise you. So what quality documentation, and when an auditor or a surveyor comes in and pulls our documentation and looks at those narrative notes, what they look for is something more descriptive and also more comparative, because when we talk about comparative documentation, we talk about what happened from admission or what happened from the last certification period or even what happened from the last visit or two. So it might look something like this. At admission, the patient required standby assistance for ambulation with the use of a walker, but now they're wheelchair bound and they shuffle their feet to propel. So they've gone from being able to ambulate with just someone for standby assistance with a walker. Now they're completely wheelchair bound and all they can do is shuffle their feet to try to propel themselves. That's a significant change. They were incontinent of bladder, but now they're incontinent of bowel and bladder. So that tells us that situation, that continence has declined and they've become more dependent. They required minimal assistance with transfers, but now they're dependent upon the assistance of the caregiver. So they were just needing somebody to minimally assist them, maybe use them for balance, to transfer from the bed to the wheelchair or the bed to the chair and back. But now they're completely dependent on that caregiver. They were independent in feeding, but now they require the caregiver to cut their food up into bite-sized pieces, and they're requiring frequent prompting. And they were able to stand for a shower with the assistance of the caregiver, but now they're too weak to stand for the duration of a shower, and they have to sit in a shower chair while the caregiver bathes them and provides that care for them. They were able to assist with their dressing, but that now they're too weak to move their limbs independently, and they're dependent upon the caregiver to do that dressing for them. So if you'll notice, we went through all 6 of those, right? And we use comparative documentation. We say they were this way, now they're this way. They were just incontinent of bladder, now they're incontinent of bowel and bladder. And we went through that entire list, and we used comparative documentation. So I guarantee if a surveyor, an auditor, pulls this note and looks at it, it paints a very clear picture of what that patient was when they came on service at admission versus what they are today when we're documenting this care. As always, thank you for all you do for our patients, our families, our facilities, and one another. If you have any questions or any ideas for future trainings, don't hesitate to email me or click me. Hope you guys have a great day. We'll talk to you later.